This guy.
Yeah, and I can remove this one. So we started.
It's a video, starting the video.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome.
I have to check that we have to share the screen first.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to. Oh, damn it. Can you see the video remote?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Lightning Talks. My name is Lynda Kellam. I'm the head of research data services at the University of Pennsylvania. And I love Lightning Talks. They're my favorite format personally. So it's exciting. Yay. Okay. So the first one we have today is a video. This person is one of our fellows who is virtual. Unfortunately, he is in an exam this morning, so he could not come. So he created a video for us for his Lightning Talk. His talk is called "Would You Manage a Vibrant Data Mine?" And his name is Noah Nessel. He's at the Ministry of Education. He's a librarian, professor of technology, and Argentinian writer. He works at the Ministry of Education in Buenos Aires and is one of the few emerging leaders in the Southern Cone. So this is Dr. Nessel. Maybe.
Welcome.
You, yeah. Okay. Up next, we have Hannah Gunderman and Limor Pierre. Is Limor? Okay, I don't see Hannah in here.
Hi, I'm here. I'm not
Oh,
sure if
you're
you
here.
can
Yay, okay.
hear me. I've had a little bit of issues logging in, but I am here.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I made you a co-host. So you're
Okay, let me go ahead and get my screen share all going.
all right. I'll introduce you while you're doing that. Okay.
Okay.
So this talk is Data Curiosities, a blog using popular culture to teach data curation concepts in the data cure curriculum. And we have two presenters. Hannah Gunderman is a cultural geographer and data management enthusiast in Pittsburgh, PA, and a data cure fellow for 2021-2022. She was previously a data gaming and popular cultural librarian at Carnegie and Mellon University Libraries, and now works for an independent video game development studio. Cool. Limor is Associate Director for Research and Strategic Initiatives at the Institution for Social and Policy Studies at Yale University. Limor works on research transparency and reproducibility. She is co-founder of the Curation for Reproducibility Consortium of Social Science Data Archives and is currently co-chairing the working group on reproducibility issues at the Research Data Alliance and Association of Computing Machinery. She received her PhD in communication studies and enjoys keeping up with research on public opinion, journalism, and democracy. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much. And how is my audio coming in? Am I sounding okay so far? Hopefully so. Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get my little timer started. I believe I'm going to be the only one presenting today, just on behalf of both of us, myself and Limor. And again, yeah, Hannah Gunderman, data curiosities. So let's talk about some pop culture. And okay, so first of all, the data cure curriculum, that really underpins all of this. And this is actually a curriculum. It's a carpentry style curriculum that was created by the Curating for Reproducibility Consortium, so CURE. And I was one of the fellows for this program. And so we got together and created a curriculum, again, a carpentry style curriculum around the idea of data curation and code review and just good practices around all of that. So repositories, good file names, documentation, data citation, different things like that. And that's going to be actually available later this summer. But here's where I come in. In my previous job as a data gaming and popular culture librarian was all about thinking about these concepts of data curation. And while I think they are exciting, and I think most people in this virtual and physical room probably think it's exciting as well, I ran into a lot of researchers who did not quite feel that way. And it was almost seen as like a burden. And so I thought, well, I wonder if there's a way that I can frame this a little bit differently and maybe get people a bit more excited about this concept of data curation. And again, it's that idea that I think sometimes when things are framed as like, I have to do this instead of I want to do this, we might be less enthusiastic about it. And unfortunately, a lot of researchers are still seeing data curation, in my experience, just as I have to do this, right? And so that's where data curiosities comes in. I have a popular culture background in terms of teaching using popular culture. And it can be a really, really good way to teach about different topics and kind of present it in a new lens to people. And so I thought, what if we talked about data curation through pop culture, which was all about what my job my former job was at CMU Libraries as a data gaming and popular culture librarian. And so I'm actually in the process right now, this is kind of a preliminary talk here, of writing blogs that introduce data curation concepts through a pop culture lens. An example, I'm not sure if anybody here has played or heard of Stardew Valley, the video game, but one of my blog posts that will be released soon is about the idea of reproducibility in Stardew Valley. So it is a farming simulator role-playing game. And in the game, you craft recipes that are based on very specific, or you craft, you have blueprints for things such as a preserves jar. And it has a specific recipe, how much wood, how much stone, how much coal do you need? And that really, as you're going throughout the process of that, it takes you through the same questions that you might ask yourself when you're putting together your data documentation package for sharing your data or code. And so in the blog post, I sort of go throughout this and talk a little bit more about, how does just playing this game teach us about data curation concepts? And so some other example topics are growing appreciation through data curation through Grateful Dead lyrics, how the video game Untitled Goose Game, I'm not sure if anybody here has played it, it's wonderful, how that can help us learn how to write good README files for our data. Choosing a trustworthy data repository, something that would meet the requirements of the trust principles, core trust seal, with inspiration from the video game Animal Crossing New Horizon, and learning about computational reproducibility through the television show Bob's Burgers. I promise it all has to do with data curation, and the blog goes into how these different examples just present these concepts in a new way. So how can you read the blog? Well, I have uploaded these slides to the Whova website. And so this is the link that you'll use, the OSF page. I can also throw it in chat after this. And over the course of the summer, these will be uploaded. So pop culture and data curation if you're interested. And if you have any additional ways to engage with or additional questions or like, hey, here's an idea for the blog, different things like that, you can feel free to email us. I will let everybody know again, this is the end of my talk. I do work in the video game industry now, so I'm actually not a data librarian anymore, but I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. Like I said, I think data curation is fascinating. And that is everything. Thank you so much for having me from Pittsburgh today.
Great. Is this one on? Yeah. Okay. We have questions. We have plenty of time for questions. So. Yay, questions.
Hi, Hannah. Will these blog posts be directed towards data curators or to researchers and data producers?
That's a really good question. So I have some of them written already, and they're sort of to both. I would say more so to data producers in the sense of, here's how we can learn about this process through pop culture. But I will say the blogs as well, they're useful for data curators and thinking about a different way to talk about these topics. So they're written a little bit more towards data producers as an audience, but hopefully relevant to everybody.
A follow-up question. What is your plan for getting the blog to your target end audience?
Yeah, so I have a lot of luck on Twitter, actually. I have a lot of luck with different, data producers, other data librarians, things like that. And I have a pretty wide network on there of that. So I'm thinking, via Twitter. I also want to on LinkedIn share these kind of things. And then again, the folks that are going to be continuing on in the Data Cure consortium in my absence will still be, distributing these blogs and things like that. But yeah, I'm hoping that I can not only for, data producers that are on the academia side, but in my new world in the video game industry, I'm also hoping that this will be an interesting connection to say, hey, we work with data all the time in video games. Here's some data curation concepts that we can learn through video games. So I have a few different kind of grassroots techniques for how I'd like to get this out to folks. Mostly social media though.
Okay, do we have any more questions for the audience? No? No.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think it's a great presentation. It's really cool. Really cool projects, definitely. All right, so next we have Olof. It's you, you're next. Sorry. So the next presentation is called 1001 Files and One Dataset. And this is Olof Olsson. He works as an IT architect at S&D and has been with the organization since 2009. Besides technical work around metadata and the discovery and deposit service, he is also a very good baker. I can attest to that too.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll damn it. Let's stop the presentation first. Okay, can you see my slides? Remote? Should. Yep. Okay, thank you for having me here. So, first I want to speak a little bit about identifiers. So, identifiers, they're really, really important. And my conclusion would be they are more important than metadata. And that will be controversial here. So identifier, they should be unique. Otherwise, it's not an identifier. And even better, ideal, it should be universally unique. It should not be another one in existence that is the same. A bad identifier is, for example, 1. That's a bad identifier because it could be anything, anywhere. And it should also be on the web because we live in the future. So it should be resolvable. It should just be a link. Actually, just having a string as an identifier doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't provide an action to do something. And in practice, it should also be really, really easy to use. It shouldn't just be a string you have in a citation. It should be clickable. It should be something you can create automatically in a system. And this is really important because of these small creatures. So this was posted on the wall, and it was a small, cute cat. And if you can see, it's bortsprungen. And that's bad because that's actually lost. But the cat has an identifier. And I'm not a cat owner, so I don't know what to do with this. But it seems to be quite globally unique. It's a long string of numbers, but it's not a link. And if it was, it's a paper, I couldn't click it. So a QR code or something, please. I hope the Morris is found. It was a year ago. Yeah, and this is a good category of identifiers. It's a Gothenburg word one, sorry. So when it comes to the identifiers, you all know, one global one is DOI. It has a few advantages. It's well known, everybody knows a DOI, even if they're not doing data publication. And it's strongly established. And it can also include metadata if you use a dataset, for example. And that's really good because then you can actually filter it and you can use it for other things. You can generate citation and all the other stuff. But it has disadvantages. It's not suitable for mass identification, and it requires metadata. And this is the bad part because you don't always have metadata. And then it's actually discouraged to create an identifier, and identification is important. Remember Morris. Morris may be already be lost. No more lost cats. And also cost. It costs a lot of money to do DOIs in a big scale. So at SN, we started to investigate how to launch an Epic service instead. It's kind of a handle service instead. So here you have no metadata required. And I still claim this is good because it fills another purpose. You can actually do mass identification and you can actually do the same basic mechanical stuff. It can take you from a citation global identifier to a target where you can find more about its resource. And it also supports something that's called partial identifiers, which is even better. Then you can actually use it for dynamic data sets. So, So metadata is always something you need. I forgot to write in complete sentence here. And I think that's a bad statement. And people say this is madness to say that metadata is not required. And I claim it's good. Because partial identifiers, that's actually kind of an awesome system they have in the Epic identifiers. So this could be used to point to a very specific, just a cell in a dataset if you want to. So for example, we have this 700142, just about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the NCC Enterprise. Yeah. And it points to the USS Enterprise homepage. So if you add a suffix to this with an @ sign, it will actually resolve to a URL, which could point you directly to an item in the dataset. And this is really useful. Then you don't have to actually mint a lot of identifiers. You can actually use this to specify specific items. So when to use Epic? Well, if you have to create a large number of identifiers, or if you want to have partial identifiers, it's really useful because then you can identify a whole block. It's thousands of files, millions of files, items in a database. That's good. And you can also use it with a DOI. And so if you want to identify a large set of data, for example, a data set that contains a lot of files, use a DOI and then just point from that DOI in the metadata to all the epics or other identifiers in that package. In that way, you get both things. So that was my main point. metadata is good, but you should really consider adding identifiers everywhere, because cats, and this is a cat that Ingo took of me on the yard. It's not lost, it's home, it has a necklace, and it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering, what are the implications of this kind of identifiers for machine readability inside datasets and across datasets if you're using several?
The implication is you have to consider this when you actually set up your data. If it's a live database, you actually have to do a tight integration when you do this, because you have to have a resolver set, and if you want to use the partial identifiers, you actually have to specify the pattern that you're going to match. So it requires a bit more work if you're doing it on a large scale, because you have to have an intelligent system. You can't just have a static landing page. So it requires a bit more setup, but usually if you are a producer of a large amount of files and large amount of data, this is not a big issue that you have. So machine actionability will actually be something you have to plan really good in advance. So a good way to do that is actually consider using universal identifiers as a primary identifications for every item in your data set. Because then you can actually use that as the thing you resolve to. It's easy to tie together if you don't do the classic thing with having a numeric identifier everywhere. Then you have to have a lot of glue code to get this to work. So that would be the thing I consider. I don't know if that was an answer or just we can talk more later. It's complicated. Yeah.
We have a question from the chat. How will Epic work with FAIR in mind?
Oh, it will, because if you put out a lot of handles, you don't have metadata on those, but you will collect them on the DOI. Ideally, that's how we want to do it. So the DOI will be also citable, and it will actually say, I have part this handle, and this handle. So it's a part, and you just have metadata on the top level of this big data set. So that's the way you tie it together. Coming from the handle, you actually don't get any discoverability in that way, unless you do a full RDF query where you actually get explore. I have this handle, and we find this is related to this data set that's have a DOI. So you really have to consider the data from metadata from the DOI to the handle, and not vice versa. Yep.
Okay. Any more questions from the audience?
Yep. Is another remote now?
Yeah. All right. Next up, thank you very much. Next up, we have a presentation called Scaling Up Data Services with Standard Ontology. And with this presentation, we have Olatunbosun Obileye from International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, Adetoun Oyelude from the University of Ibadan, and Hafeez Adepoju from International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. So thank you very much.
Thank you for introducing us. I'm not sure whether the right screen is what I'm sharing. Please give me one more second.
It is, and you can start your video.
Okay. Okay. So I'm told, Hafeez, do you want to say? Yeah.
No. Let's see you, Bosun. Can you share your video so that we can see you? But hi, everybody. Yes, I'm presenting, but Bosun is the one who is going to be speaking. He will show you himself very shortly. And I can see Hafeez there. So hi, everybody. Thank you.
He's showing himself.
Yes, he is. He's showing himself now. Thank you.
Okay.
Hafeez.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Nigeria. I will be co-presenting with Bosun Obileye and Adetoun Oyelude on the scaling data services with standard ontologies. from the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, Nigeria. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. We actually thought of being at this event physically, but we couldn't make it down. It's a pity. We deal so much with data. In fact, everything we do in this world is data. When you talk, it's data. When you sleep, it's data. And the person that passed on is data. How do we improve on data services? Olof is part of those that deal with data services. Sorry for mentioning your name, but I'm excited with your work. And how do we ensure that what we are working on, we can transfer to the future generation and they sit tap into the back? 10 years ago, I'm sure many of us will remember these phones. We used to call one of them the rugged phone. When you fell inside water, you pick it up. And that is what we're looking back into. 10 years ago, there is a donor, is Gamma. And he had some funds. He wanted some projects to be carried out. He sent out the bids, and a lot of researchers applied. They won it. They executed the project individually or by some organizations. However, after completion of the project, some of the researchers left the organizations, some lost their laptops, and nobody was really caring about how do you handle the data from this project. 5 years later, that was 5 years ago, this same donor, he called other organizations. I have some money, these are dollars. Can you guys bid for the same project? I want you to enhance it. I'm assuming that we are enhancing, there's a meal, there's a food in Africa, we call it cassava. We love it so much, and we will have another one called yam. And the researchers came around, this time around, they said they're going to fortify it, and everybody's putting everything together. When they were through, the donor asked a question. Please, can you guys get access to what was done 10 years ago or 5 years ago so that we can compare what you have now, what was derived before? Nobody has an answer. Now, this is my story. This year, donor government is funding similar projects with different researchers and organizations again, winning the grants. In addition, donor government want to see the indicator on the progress in the past 10 years. This is a dilemma. Now I'm talking about what we here in Africa, we have witnessed. And I have the opportunity to be at the middle of this kind of scenario in which we have funds from BMGF, from USAID, from EU, from African Union, and then there is no accountability for data. Now, the problem is the data that we have been generated before lack quality metadata. Each scientist has a way of naming their data. There is no particular data dictionary, and some of the data that has been derived has been expunged by the principal investigator. So there's no definite ontology to adopt. So now, what do? We have this unstructured and unclaimed data, and then we are building ontology. Recently in Africa, along with Wageningen University, we were able to build ontology for cocoa because we generate cocoa so much in Africa, especially in West Africa. This is part of the problem we have. The past work that has been done, we don't have a means of bringing them together. So we require a service of somebody like Olof, who is a data service specialist, and somebody like Hafeez, like Tong, and myself, who needs to look into this and see how can we make a meaning out of it. So here comes in ontology. We need to begin to look at the connections for different domains. For our cassava, we root tuber class of our food. When we are looking at it, how do we bring the definitions that are associated with these different data sets peculiar to us in Africa? We started imbibing the culture of ontology. And what we have done now in Africa is to ensure that what is being done by the advanced world, we brought it into our ecosystem And then we look at our past data. Some people are developing tools that can make meaning using it's like a big data platform, try to derive structure from unstructured data, cleaning them up with data curation, developing tools in different labs, and then we integrate them to a system that has API and can filter each before putting them into a fundable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable repository. Here we go finally, and that gives us what you're looking for. We are working in partnership with different working groups to develop standard ontology to fit our data. We are not a silo, and that is why part of those that we have been working with is dataset. In CGIAR, we are building a system of such also to ensure that data that has been generated in the past, today, and the future will have meaning. I don't know whether you have something to say, but thank you. In our local language, we say adupe, meaning merci, gracias.
So we have questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, we have Paula. They're done. We have a question over here.
Is it working? Yeah.
I'm really interested to know if you're able to get this conversation on ontology into the library schools within and across Africa.
Oh, Tudon, you're on mic.
Yes. Thank you for
Yes.
that. Okay, don't want to answer? Yes, don't.
Yes, I wanted to say that it is something we are actually thinking about, and that is why we are collaborating across institutions. The IITA, where Bosun works, and the University of Ibadan Library School will certainly be able to collaborate and embed this into one or two courses that are taken in the library school. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's good to see y'all. And thanks for presenting. Oh gosh, this mic. Just gonna see if there's anybody from UCLA on the chat on the Zoom. I think we've had a presentation decide to not show up. All right, so we're going to move to our last presentation for today, which is called De-jargon-ifying. That's a hard one for this morning. De-jargon-ifying the data support space. We have, first off, Paula Lackey from Carleton College, who is a longtime IASSIST member, and Deborah Wiltshire from GISA's Institute for the Social Sciences. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah. You doing the techie? I'm gonna try. Where's this? Yeah, that's it. Wonderful. Thank you. I think it'll catch us anywhere.
Yeah, I know. I hate these things. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last day of the conference. So we are going to talk about jargon, something that's unavoidable for all of us. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about jargon, what it is, and what we feel about it, and then I will hand over to Paula for the next bit. So first of all, let's think about what we mean by jargon. So jargon is simply special terms, special words that we use within our own profession. And we know we do it. We all do it. We all have these special terms and words that only we use. Now, this is part of life, but I just want to read a definition from the Cambridge English Dictionary that I found, because I think it sums up what we feel about jargon. So it says that when anyone uses jargon, he or she is speaking to others belonging to a privileged community and deliberately excluding outsiders. And this is one of the issues really with jargon is it is by its very nature either inclusive or exclusive. So really, by our use of jargon, we're determining, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, who can belong to our group and who can't. So if you understand the jargon, you can take part in the conversation and you're part of the gang. If you don't understand that jargon, then you can't partake fully in these conversations. So to some degree, you're automatically excluded. Now, is this really such a problem? Well, you know, we would argue that it is. Now, if you think about it, we are in a data landscape where collaboration is commonplace. And increasingly, collaboration happens across disciplinary boundaries. So we're no longer just demographers or librarians or sociologists or political scientists. We mingle a lot more than we ever have done. And that's an issue because we all have our own ways of talking about things. So what we find is we're using multiple different terms for the same thing, and we end up talking at cross purposes. And this has happened to me quite a lot recently because I moved organization, I moved country. And suddenly I've had to relearn how to talk about the job that I've been doing for, you know, nearly 6 or 7, 8 years. And this is an issue because it shuts down the efficiency at which we can collaborate. So I think this is really a problem because we end up talking at cross purposes. We end up misunderstanding each other, and it's not an efficient and sometimes not a pleasant way of working when you suddenly realize that you're both talking about the same thing, but you just haven't realized it.
Or worse, you're talking about something completely different and using the exact same terms, and the sentences still make sense. That's the one that I get a little baffled by.
Yeah. I mean, this is true. This is true. So we think it's a problem, and we think, you know, we need to think about it. And what happens in practice, I think, from my own anecdotal experience, is that one person ends up adapting to meet the other. And that's determined probably to a large degree by who is more willing to adapt. Now, the situation, I think, creates difficulties, especially for students and early career researchers. You know, when we first come into this business, we're already grappling with the complexities of the world of data, which is never as simple as it should be. And when you first start out, you simply don't have the confidence to enter the fray of trying to navigate the jargon and meet in this common ground. So there are going to be certain groups which are going to be more likely to be excluded by their lack of understanding of the language. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Paula to talk a little bit about where we think we can help.
Right. So we're focused on students, and the Data Squad International is an organization of a handful of us who are talking across nations and across disciplines and across boundaries to support the work with student employees in the delivery of data services. So I started a data squad at Carleton basically in 1993, but it's been going on and evolving over time. And in the last 5-6 years, it's become a thing. So students are now joining the data squad, and I'm the one who's switching up the jargon quite a lot. So I'll go to CS and I'll talk about data science, and I'll get all excited about data science. And I'll go to economics and I'll talk about database management. And I'll go into the library and I'll talk to the library students about usually information design. And I'll go to the sociologists and I'll talk about qualitative analysis and what are your data and how do you manage your stuff. And across all these disciplines, it's all the same thing. I'm teaching them all basically fair data management practices. I'm trying to do it though from their perspective. And then as I pull them in, they feel like they're joining something. It's a squad after all. It takes a lot of effort on my part to help them think that they're a group. But I pull them in and then they start talking to each other, and they have to work, because they have to work together across boundaries, they have to learn to communicate across their disciplinary boundaries. Now, within disciplines, part of the point for undergraduates is to become proficient in the jargon of that undergraduate discipline. They have to, as their senior thesis, they have to project themselves as an economist, as a political scientist, and that means employing the jargon perfectly, which is counterproductive to communication across boundaries. And so within the squad, it's a constant blend. We're constantly going back and forth. And I've had some success, so I thought maybe I could share this with the world and see if anybody else wanted to do that. So this is where Deborah came in, where Tim Dennis at UCLA has come in, and we've got one starting in Toronto and another interest coming in from San Diego. And the point is to share the burden of the administration of working with student workers. So most people, we did a survey last year and we learned what we expected, but nonetheless, it's borne out in the data that it's very difficult to work with student workers because they go away. You get them trained up and they're like, yes, this is wonderful. You understand. I just got you ready. Now you're now you're going to go work for somebody else. And it happens over and over and over again. But you know what? That's the point with students, because we can disseminate a shared communication protocol across all the disciplines if we can continue to pull them in, train them up, and then send them out to disseminate that knowledge across their disciplines. That's the goal. And Data Squad International is a meta design to help those of us who are trying to survive employing students, which is its own beast. But we welcome others to join in. We don't have our thing up there. We have a budding website, and it's extraordinarily nascent, but we're excited to build and see if there's something larger that can come of it. So that's our spiel. Do we have any questions? Not a one. Everybody wants lunch. How many of you employ students? Just raise your hand. There's a few.
So, oh, sorry. Yeah, that's correct. So jargon, as a tech person, I feel guilty because we do it all the time. So how do you experience the jargon between different disciplines when it comes to broad concepts for documenting data? Do you have to speak a lot differently to other disciplines? Because when we develop tools at S&D, we usually have to use different concept entirely between medicine and social science.
Yeah, exactly. Look, the example I like to use, it's a little overwrought, but it gets a point across, and that is in IT. Let's say an economist has a laptop that's gone dead and they need to get it repaired by IT. IT says, back up your data. The economist takes all of their spreadsheets and puts them in a folder, in Google. Okay, I've backed up my data. And then the IT professional wipes the computer and the person comes back and says, where are my files? You only told me to back up my data. I backed up my data. Like, well, turns out the word data is almost useless because it means something completely different to everyone. And so in general, I mean, we say data constantly at this conference, and we swim through the variability of what is it we're actually talking about when we're talking about data, or even metadata or paradata, or all of the things that go around communicating about information. So I find myself saying mostly, what is the smallest unit of the thing you're looking at? Instead of saying data. Do you have a collection of anything? Like I'll have English professors who are like, I don't have any data. And I'm like, but I have 7,000 poems. Well, what are you doing with your poems? How are you managing your poems? Do you have, and so I just get the word data out of there and talk. And the key from my perspective is figure out where they are. When you're talking with senior researchers, they're never going to change they're embedded in their jargon. But I think that it's one of the gaps in data services that we know what data are. We know so much about what data are that we don't communicate it to people who actually need our help.
Yeah, that's actually one of my interests. I work at S&D, and part of my work is doing language work. And we're striving to create a national group for working with research data vocabulary to find a common ground, but also to chart where we have different meanings. Because as you say, data seems the most fundamental and simple thing. For us, it's like, well, talking about an atom, but for researchers, what do we need for them to understand what we want? And how do we learn to maybe not always speak that language? I mean, I'm a professional translator. I'm used to learning different languages, but how do we help different disciplines to translate? Because that's really part of this work too, to help us understand one another, even though we may be speaking different languages. So this is really interesting. And I think there's a great need to somehow come together to find a common ground, but also to learn where we have design different meanings.
Yeah, I think the main thing that we want to get across is that start small. This is one piece of what Data Squad does, is get them young when they're enthusiastic and they don't know it's difficult. And then they'll be able to do the translations. I mean, many of us have experienced going from SPSS to S or R, and then you're like, oh, I just want a variable, and you're working in R. Where is the variable? It doesn't exist in R, right? And these variables are so basic to social science. What do you mean you don't have them? So this is the kind of stuff that causes frustrations. You give a workshop, oh geez, 10 years ago, a workshop in R, you just see little heads bursting, getting angry all over the place. I just want to do an ANOVA in R. How do I do that? Like, well, no, you have to understand. And they're like, no, I don't. Right? I'm never leaving SPSS. And this is, it's delicate because people are invested in their jargon. They're so deeply invested and identified with their jargon that it can be super challenging to cross boundaries like that, which again is why I work with the junior beginners, the entering folk, and to slowly change culture.
But I think it can be quite simple things that help. So some of the work that I do, you put, if you're writing a report, you put key terms and definitions. Mm-hmm. And it's such a basic thing that we don't do enough of. But otherwise, what you write is almost a mystery to anybody other than the select few. So it's just a shift to thinking about if I'm writing a report which others are going to read, I put key terms and definitions. And it's a start. It's a small piece of the puzzle, but
it's a sensitivity. Just being sensitive to the jargon when you can recognize your own jargon and identify what it is. There was a presentation earlier that was remote from a librarian who was talking about data. And the first thing she did was describe what data she's talking about. And it was theses and dissertations in the repository. And once you knew she's talking about theses and dissertations collections in a repository, you know what the data are. But if you thought you were going to be listening to a conversation about data repositories, she didn't have anything to do with data repositories, and strictly speaking, it was exactly the thing to do. She did it, it was really helpful. She blew right by it, so I'm not sure everybody saw that, but it was exactly what we all need to do. Did we just declare it lunch?
Just a minute. I said all remote
We get to start lunch early today, so
participants,
thank you very
if
much
you
for
can
everybody
just
coming, and thank you to our presenters again.
do your
This is wonderful.
Yes, so that we could take a. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody online.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.